Here we are at the New River Gorge today, getting ready to do a little bit of bolt replacement. And before we head out to the actual cliff, we're going to do a quick review of the materials and tools needed to replace bolts in a sustainable manner. First and foremost, you're going to need to remove the existing bolt, and depending on what type of bolt you're dealing with, you may be able to just use a wrench to remove the entire bolt. Usually if we're working with a 5-piece bolt, that's possible, not too much of a problem, and we are going to go over that in detail. You might have to chop that bolt, and again, you're going to need a big breaking bar and a selection of deep well sockets depending on the size bolt that you're working with. So we have those with us today. Once the bolt is removed, okay, then we can go about re-drilling that same hole over again. If we have to core drill, which is what we're going to be doing today because we're going to be working with wedge bolts, then we're also going to need quite a few other things. Number one is going to be a diamond tipped core bit that we're going to use to drill the existing bolt out with. That is attached to a water injection system and a chuck adapter for our SDS bit. That's going to go on our hammer drill. A couple other things we'll need to clean out our hole will be a good blower so that we can blow all the dust out. We also need a good metal brush, okay, for cleaning out the hole. That is probably the most important part of the entire process, is making sure that we're working with a good clean hole so that we get a good glue bond to the rock. You're also going to need a glue gun with glue and mixing nozzle. I recommend that you carry a rock hammer with you. This always comes in handy, and you find a lot of use for that out there. You're also going to need a cheap little garden sprayer so that you can attach it to your water injection system here. That's what's going to keep your drill bit cool, flush the hole out appropriately, and make drilling out the old existing bolt easier. And then of course you're going to need a hammer drill. A lot of different models there. We're using a big old Hilti TE7A, really powerful, makes the job very easy. And to store it all in, I recommend that you get rigged up with a bucket, a tool bucket that you can attach to your rope to carry all the different things that you need to do the job. That's it. Hi, I'm Jim Taylor, and in the following video, we're going to be demonstrating a little bit about bolt removal. One of the things we're going to want to talk about today is what we call sustainable bolting, removing old, rusty, rotten bolts in their entirety and reusing the same hole over again, either to replace with another mechanical bolt or to add a glue in to that initial site. So, looking at what we have here in the parking lot this morning, instead of going out to the cliff and working on some existing routes, we're going to do our demo here in the first part of the video, and then we'll take you out to the New River Gorge where we'll actually replace an entire route from top to bottom. So what we have here, we've placed 3 different bolts into our block of sandstone out in the parking lot here. The first one is what is known as a 5-piece sleeved anchor. This is made by Powers. And then we have 2 wedge bolts over here. Now, if we are going to use mechanicals, I really like to see people using the 5-piece for a number of different reasons. One, you have a nice flat head laying against the cliff. There's no bolt sticking out to impede your carabiner, potentially causing maybe a cantilever or unclipping the carabiner from the hanger, which is quite common when you see a wedged bolt that has the threaded end sticking out a little too far. That can also make it very hard to get your carabiner in here and clip. The other reason I prefer the 5-piece anchor is it's much easier to remove. It requires less equipment, less time, just saving you a lot of hassle. Wedge bolts, if you want to remove them in their entirety, you actually have to use a diamond-tipped core drill that's water-cooled, and that requires bringing a good bit of heavy equipment out to the cliff. And is more time and a little bit messy, but the overall end product is well worth the effort if you do have to remove wedge bolts. So, first step of our process here is we're going to look at taking apart a 5-piece sleeved anchor, removing it from the rock, re-drilling the hole out to clean it out, and putting another bolt in its place to replace it. Then we'll move on to wedge bolts. We'll look at chopping them. If the bolt needs to be moved, maybe it was originally placed in bad rock or is in a bad clipping stance and we want to move the bolt, we're going to chop this bolt, and we're also going to patch and hide, okay, the old bolt. And for our third bolt, we're going to use the sustainable method where we break out the water-cooled diamond-tipped core bit. We're going to drill the bolt out in its entirety, remove it from the rock, and then replace it with a glue-in. Once again, we're going to be removing a 5-piece Powers bolt, and the first step of the process is just choose the appropriate size wrench. And begin to remove the bolt. You can pull the bolt out entirely, remove your hanger, and what you're going to have left is a little sleeve down inside. Now, quite often it's possible to fish that sleeve out. If you can't manage to fish it out, your drill bit will destroy it. It's going to cause a little bit more dulling on the drill bit, but a lot of times if you fish around, we can get this to remove. So we've removed the entire bolt. Unfortunately, our sleeve is stuck down in the hole. Oftentimes I can fish those out. This being a brand new bolt that I just placed, the sleeve didn't want to come out. Usually I just use a pair of needle nose pliers and a little hook tool, fish it right out of there. Then I can just drill. In this case, since that sleeve is such thin metal, our drill will just tear it up and remove it from the hole for us. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Line up our drill bit with the existing hole. And we now have a nice clean hole to replace with the glue-in. The next step is going to be to clean out our hole thoroughly. If we're going to put glue-ins in, we need to make sure that the glue bonds to the rock, and all this dust here needs to go. So we've got a blower, and we also have a wire brush. Okay, this is good hard sandstone, so I can use a steel brush on this. If you're working in softer stones, desert sandstones, or soft rock of any kind, make sure you use a fiberglass brush, or you'll end up scraping too much dust or even just creating more dust as you clean out the hole. So the first thing I'm going to do is blow all this dust off. Usually this just falls off when you're drilling in a vertical environment. And then I'm going to start cleaning out the hole. Once I've removed most of the dust with my blower, I take my wire brush, give everything a good scrub. And then we'll take the blower to it again. Scrub it at least once more. And each time you can see we're getting less and less dust till we have a nice clean hole ready for our glue-in. So we've removed our 5-piece sleeved bolt, re-drilled the hole out, and it's now ready to take a glue-in. What we're going to be looking at next is what to do if we need to chop a wedge bolt and move it to a new location. So we're not going to want to go ahead and drill this all the way out. We're going to chop the bolt and patch it, repair the rock, so to speak, and move the bolt placement to a better location. So the first thing again is pick the appropriate size wrench. Make sure that you use a big braking bar so that you have good leverage for this, and I recommend a deep weld socket because oftentimes the bolt will start to come out a little bit, sticking it up an inch or two, and you need to be able to allow that bolt to move up into the socket to get it to snap off. So we'll put our wrench on, and we have the wrong size on here, so let's dig into our tool bag. There we go. We're going to purposely over tighten this bolt, causing what we call torsional shear. We're going to take the metal past its elastic limit, causing it to snap off. And it being a brand new bolt, it might take a little bit of work. Your old bolts often snap very quickly. And there that one went. The head came off. And whenever I do this on a vertical clip, I always clip the hanger to me so it doesn't drop to the ground, and I'll later try to recover any pieces that have broken. They're usually laying right at the base of the route. So our next step is we're just going to take our hammer and we're going to seat this bolt head down till it's flush. And then I like to use a carpenter's nail set. You can use another bolt, any piece of metal that will sit on there. And we're going to try to knock this bolt in so it's counterset, recessed down in the hole, as far as we can get it to go. And that one seated nicely down in there. And now we're going to patch this hole for cosmetic reasons. And I found the best stuff to use is called plumber's putty. You can buy it at Lowe's or Home Depot. It'll be in the plumbing section. And it looks like a big Tootsie Roll. And it's a two-part epoxy that's nice and solid that you mix together just in your hands. You can see it's got a dark center, a lighter outside, but when you mix it together, it comes out as a nice light gray. And in most places, that will fairly closely match the rock color. It takes a few minutes of working this together to really mix it up good. You want to mix it till it becomes a nice, consistent color without any swirls of dark gray or light gray in there. We're just about there. And this stuff will set up pretty quickly. It takes maybe about 2 to 3 minutes before it really starts to harden. But since it's like Play-Doh, you don't have to worry about it being too viscous and falling out of your hole once you put it in place. So take a nice amount of this, kind of roll it up. I'm going to insert it down into the hole. Apply some more until I get the hole completely filled. And this next part, some people might think is a little bit gross, but I find it to be very effective. Spit on the hole. You need a little saliva on there to moisten it, work it around. Water will work, but I'm usually not carrying water out there with me, and I always have plenty of spit. So actually spit on the hole. For some reason, that makes the surface of the putty smooth around nicely and conform to the stone. And if I have any rock dust, I'll use that, but oftentimes I'll carry just a little bit of sand from the base of the cliff up with me, and I'll blow that on there, swirl that around on top of the hole as well. That'll give it some texture, help color it to the same color as the rock that we're repairing, and make it so that you can't find that hole, that everything is cosmetically nice once again. So once again, we've removed a 5-piece rawl, left a nice clean hole for our glue in. Secondly, we chopped a wedge bolt, patched it, kind of camouflaged it up so it looks nice. And for the third part, what we're going to do is remove a wedge bolt in its entirety using a diamond-tipped core bit that's water-cooled. And again, that'll allow us to reuse the same hole over again by putting a glue-in bolt in. So step one is go ahead and remove the nut and hanger off of the bolt. And we have a typical hammer drill here, but we're going to put it just into drill mode. Don't want to use the hammer apparatus on here at all. I've got just a ghetto little garden pump sprayer here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to line the core bit up on the existing bolt. It'll insert right over top of it. What we're going to actually be doing is drilling the rock around the bolt, removing it entirely. This process needs to be water cooled. So we want to turn our water on and then start slowly drilling this bolt out. Check where we're at, and you can see we can remove the bolt in its entirety. It's not a long process once you get it dialed in, but after you've done this a number of times, you'll realize the drill gives you a little kind of a funny feel when you get down to the end of the bolt and you can tell that the bolt is spinning. At that point in time, pull the drill out and I'll be able to remove the entire wedge bolt. Quite often you'll find that if you drill a little too deep, it'll be stuck up inside your drill bit, but it pulls out quite easily. But if you're going that far, you're drilling a little too far. And as I said, with time and practice, you'll get the feel for when the bolt is loose and when you can reach down and pull it out. The next step in our process, if we're going to put a glue into this hole, this diamond tipped core bit right here drills such a smooth hole that we're going to want to rough this hole up a little bit. And we're probably going to end up deepening this hole a little bit as well to accommodate our glue in. So we'll go ahead and remove the core bit, go back to a regular 1/2 inch bit here. And then we'll finish drilling this hole out the rest of the way to the proper depth, and we'll make sure that we run up against the sides a little bit to roughen the hole up. We want to switch back to hammer mode on our hammer drill. And we made sure that we roughened our holes up nicely. And now we're going to go back to the process of blowing the hole out and scrubbing it out with a wire brush. This hole is a little bit wetter than usual because we're working in a horizontal plane here instead of a vertical one like we normally do. So usually you have a lot more water. Now that we've gotten all the dust and debris, and we have a nice clean hole to work with, the next thing we're going to look at is inserting a glue in. First thing I always do is just test my hole, make sure that it's to the proper depth, proper size, that my glue in fits nicely. And then we'll break out our 2-part epoxy, fill our hole full of epoxy, and put the glue in. So at the end of the day, just wanted to take one quick look at our patchwork here. Anyone walking past or even a climber coming past this is never going to notice this little bit of patchwork that you've done. The epoxy's now hardened up. It's got the same texture as the rock. Might be slightly off color, but if you look at all the different colors going on here, it doesn't stand out at all. So you're kind of keeping the aesthetic quality of the cliff that we climb on. And also, this stuff is super hard, so it'll wear just like the rock does as far as eroding out. But just wanted to take one final quick look at that. And that looks a lot better than leaving either a hole or an old rusty bolt sticking out of the wall. So first step is to remove the existing hanger and nut, and you can see we have a rusty old quick link and what looks to be a steel ring that's still in pretty good shape. I'm going to go ahead and take those off. Of course, trying not to drop any of the equipment down to the ground. And so our next step is to drill out the existing bolt, and we're going to slip the core bit right over top of the existing bolt. Try to get it lined up at about the same angle. Start applying our water and drill away. Oops, didn't turn it quite all the way off, did I? There we go. And you can see we removed the entire bolt in its entirety. And it took probably a little less than a minute to get this old wedge bolt out. So what we're going to do next is to clean out this hole, drill it out to the proper depth for our glue in, and then we'll show you that application next. The next step is to go ahead and we're going to have to deepen this hole by about 1 inch to accommodate the glue in. And the diamond tip bit actually cuts such a smooth hole that we want to rough up the edges a little bit with a standard drill bit to make sure that we have a really good epoxy bond. So we need to adjust to hammer drill. And now we've gotten most of the wet stuff out of there and drilled it to the proper depth, roughened up the hole. Our next step is going to be to clean the hole using the blower and the wire brush. So now we need to clean this hole out appropriately, and we need to make sure it's really good and clean. We don't want any excess dust or grit in there. It can affect your glue bond. So make sure you take your time and do a good job when cleaning out the hole. And usually I start by scrubbing it out, knocking any excess debris off the sides. And then I'll take my blower and I'm gonna do a couple of good squeezes into there to blow as much of the dust out as I possibly can. I'll then brush it again, and I'm going to repeat this process 2 to 3 times so I can see I'm not getting much grit out of the hole and it looks nice and clean. And it looks like we're just about there. We'll give it one more shot just to be on the safe side. And blow it out one final time. And now we're on to our final step, which will be to apply our epoxy and install our bolt. So I'm going to take my glue gun now, and I like to insert the nozzle all the way into the back of the hole. I'm going to give it a good squeeze, and then I'm going to slowly pull my glue gun out, leaving a trail of epoxy behind. And the key thing here is to make sure you get enough epoxy into the hole. If you put your bolt in and you don't have epoxy oozing out, then you don't have enough epoxy in there. You're going to have to pull the bolt back out again and give it another squeeze, another shot. And I usually carry paper towels with me to clean up my mess. Kind of forgot them in a rush today, so we're going to use just a little bit of a lichen here if we have any excess epoxy. What I also like to do as I install the bolt is to spin it clockwise, and I can tell you right now I got just not quite enough glue in there. This happens about 1 out of every 10 bolts get a little bit too deep. And second try should be good. Like I said, we want to make sure we have epoxy actually oozing out of the hole. And it looks like we're going to be just about perfect. I'm letting the air pockets out by spinning it. And you can see I've got a small amount of epoxy coming out of the hole now. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of lichen. I'm going to clean that excess epoxy from around the hole, just so it'll look nice. And I will take that with me when I leave. And we'll dress it up a little bit and show you one quick final photo here of what it looks like when it's neatly done.